to think I've got us going live. We'll started.
So it was Mesopotamia, modern day Turkey. That's where the Garden of Eden was, or was said to be.
I try to give you all the most likely where most scholars would say it is. But on a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of contention. So,
Yeah.
nobody agrees is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Or not everybody agrees is probably the best way to say it. Okay, so let's just do a quick recap. First, before we get started, I want to pray. I kick myself every time because I forget to pray. Right after y'all walk out, I'm like, we didn't pray.
Can we
Nice.
do prayer requests?
Yeah.
I do have one. Dan, his truck is not running, his motor.
Mhm.
Something's wrong with it. So we need to pray that that gets back running because that's how he makes money.
Okay. Sure thing. Pray for Dan. How's your mom? Or not mom, but stepmom?
I don't know. I haven't talked to him. So
Okay. What about David's car? I get going. Is it still at Floyd's?
oh dear God, I don't know. I think
Poor guy.
I think they got it. He also has a ticket too, 2 tickets, because he got pulled over for speeding, and he didn't have insurance on that car, and he also.
You are telling us on Facebook, so they can definitely hear you.
Are you serious?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Well, anyways, just pray for him. He's going through. Did you just mute it?
I don't think the mute. I don't have it set up, so I don't think the mute works.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Just pray for him. He needs it.
We love you, Dave.
We do. We love you.
Okay.
I need prayers still.
Okay.
I'm supposed to go see the doctors today, but my medical people dropped the ball and didn't get me.
Okay. This is for the heart stuff?
Yeah, I go see the heart doctor Friday, but I'm supposed to see my primary doctor today, and he's supposed to review the tests I did, and we're supposed to go from there.
Okay.
But things are doing good, I just, my blood pressure is going good. That's where I get my critical alerts, is the number right, like I get from 110 to 140, then the second number will be like 60, sometimes a little bit higher, and then the bottom number is anywhere from 60 to, it was 70 this morning. So he called me up and asked me if I was still alive. They do that quite often. I get like every other day, I get a phone call from them asking me that.
I think answering the phone would be enough, but
Yeah. Yeah, see the text.
No, thanks for calling. All right, let's pray. Dear God, thank you so much. We invite you into this place, God. I would like to bring a couple of requests that we have for our brothers and sisters. And if you could touch the situations with Dan and David, they're having vehicle issues and they need those. That's their livelihood. God, I know that you can reach out and that you can bless that situation and get them both back on the road. God, we pray for Alyssa's stepmom. That whatever she went through today was exactly what it needed to be, and that she is healthy and better. And God, we ask that you would touch Phil, that you would restore his body, that you would get him back to health so he can be the lively young man that we know and love. God, soften our hearts tonight. Come into this place. Let this be a fruitful discussion. We're here in remembrance of you. We're here to study you, and that is for no other reason. In your holy name we pray. Amen. let's get right into it. So, um, the Genesis highlights. So we start out with creation. We spend a little bit of time on creation. We get to see how God created everything up to and including us, the humans. We move out of creation, and the very next story is how we immediately screwed it all up. And because we partook of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, we end up falling away from God, and um, that sets us on the long, arduous road to the cross. And thankfully, we're on the far side of the cross, so this is for our learning, but we don't have to worry about these things anymore. Next, we have the flood. This is skipping through a couple smaller stories, but the next we have the flood. This is when everything has really not been good, and God just says, I'm gonna wipe everybody out. We're gonna start over. However, there was one righteous man, and because of that one righteous man, um, he and his family members get saved. He builds an ark. He spends 100 years building an ark. They end up floating around for about a year or so, and they land in, this is, again, we talked about Eden a little bit ago. Eden, we think because of where all the different rivers, their headwaters come from, that it's probably somewhere in Turkey. um, Noah ends up landing. A lot of people say Mount Ararat, which is currently in Turkey. I don't think, and some scholars agree with me. Uh, I don't think that Mount Ararat makes sense because the very next story, when we have the Tower of Babel, the culture that comes out of Noah and his children moves straight west, and then we get in the Shinar plains, which is where the Tower of Babel is, and Babylon, and all that. We know where that is. Well, Mount Ararat is way north of Babylon and the Shinar Plains, so it doesn't make sense with the Bible. The Zagros Mountains, which are in, I think, Iran, which is to the east of Babylon, works out perfect.
Was there enough people to support people from Mount Ararat to Babylon?
What do you mean?
Was the population large enough where they could be scattered that far?
Well, the population started with 8,
Yeah.
because 8 people got off of that boat, and then some 150 years later, they're all still working together in Shinar. So unless they all moved south, which would immediately disagree with the scripture, because the scripture said they came from the east to the plains of Shinar. Um, they would have had to all move together because they spoke one language, they were one culture, and then when they decided they were going to build up to the heavens, that's where they got split up. So the scattering didn't happen until after that. And that's why myself and a bunch of scholars, it's not just me and one other guy, but a lot of people think it's the Zagros mountain range. Um, so, um, and then we skip ahead. So we have the Tower of Babel. All that happens. They try to build up and they get scattered. We skip ahead a little bit. We're going to run into the patriarch of patriarchs, which is Abraham. Terah, Abraham, and his brother are in the Ur of Chaldees, which is south of Babylon. Okay, God moves the family. If you read further in Scripture, it sounds like God called him from Ur of Chaldees, but when you're in Genesis, it looks like the family moves up north of Israel in the Turkey area up by the Euphrates River. And then God calls Abraham. and he starts working his way south into Israel. Okay, let me pull up a map since we're not actually looking at these slides.
Well, that would kind of make sense. They just follow the river plains because that's the valley and stuff.
Alyssa's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'm so glad you decided to pull up.
Are we talking about Israel, or? All right, so here is, let me turn it off this one so we can see what everything is. All right, so can y'all see my, you cannot. Let's close the slideshow. We're gonna open this and come over here. Oh, cool. You can do it. I believe in you. All right, so get off of that. Turkey. Okay, this is modern Turkey. And then over here, this would be around the area where all the headwaters of the different rivers come together. This was like the Eden area. This up here, I got to use the cursor so everybody online can see it. This up here is Mount Ararat. Okay, in Genesis it says that it landed on the mountains of Ararat, and I can't remember exactly right now, but in Hebrew or Aramaic, one of them, Ararat is just like a generic term. Okay, so just because this one is called Mount Ararat, and Mount Ararat has signs and stuff that says Noah's Ark this way, you know, uh, Chuck Missler makes the funny statement. He's like, everybody that has went over there has found Noah's Ark, but none of them has any evidence of it. They all come back saying, we got it, we found some wood, we found the shape, whatever. But they all find it and all in different places. But there are signs on Mount Ararat that says like, Noah's Ark up this way. But the oldest story around, you'd figure that there's going to be a little bit of the tourism hunting kind of thing. Anyways, but the Zagros Mountains are, you can see this range right here. I think this will highlight it if I click it. Yep. Okay, so this is the Zagros Mountains right here in this area. This in Iraq is Babylon. So Baghdad is ancient Babylon, essentially. Down here is Ur of the Chaldees. So if, according to Genesis, it landed in the Ararat Mountains, okay, it could very easily be the Zagros Mountains, and then it could go straight west and be at the Shinar Plain, which is this area right here. That's where the Tower of Babel was. Just south of that right here is the Ur of the Chaldees. This is where Terah and his family was originally, or a little bit further south. That's Babylon right there. Okay, so in Genesis, they move up here. Okay, some of this I need to, let me see, I can probably just put, let's see, why is it? Come on, there we go. That's what I look for. Genesis locations. Perfect. Somehow these are not in order. But anyways, so up here at 6, this is Haran. This is where Terah died. When we're introduced to Terah, this is Abraham's father. Haran is one of his sons. However, Haran doesn't make it over here, so they probably named this town, which is still named Haran, after his lost son. I got to speed up a little bit though. We're never going to get going. Anyway, so Abraham's up here. Abraham gets called down through here, and we get to see all these uh, cool interactions at the different places, and how he ends up naming um, a lot of the sites that exist still in Israel. The name is called etiological naming, and it's where they name a place because of the event that happened there. There's a lot of places like we see after. So we've got Abraham. He ends up having Isaac, and all. I'm skipping over tons of story. Isaac has Jacob and Esau. Jacob goes back up here to the Euphrates, and then when he is coming back, Jacob has already had his 12 sons. We have the whole interaction of him meeting up with Esau. Esau's like, well, come with me back to my territory. And Jacob's like, okay, you go ahead and I'll meet you there. And then he goes the opposite direction because he's still afraid of his brother. Right when they get back into Israel, there's a city there, and the prince ends up raping Jacob's daughter, Dinah. Okay, that prince's name is Shechem. Okay, and Jacob's sons end up killing the entire city of all the men in the city after they have them circumcised. Well, from that point on, that place is called Shechem, which is the name of the guy that raped Dinah there. So like a lot of the names are named that because of what happened there. It's not just they were named that before. Whatever they were named before, most of the time is lost, and the names are just based on the events. So let's go back. I gotta pop back and forth so I know where we're at. So Jacob comes in here. What we already talked about. We talked about Dinah. The next story we're going to move is onto Joseph. Joseph is, kind of the painful little brother that, like, he's got a big future ahead of him, but he knows it way too early, and he's a jerk about it. So his brothers get rid of him. He ends up getting taken down here to Egypt. Okay. He gets taken down here to Egypt. He spends about, I think how many years he spends. I don't remember off the top of my head. He spends some period of time here and goes through quite a lot. He's made head of the household successfully, and then he's accused of rape, and he goes to prison. Then he's made head of the prison because everywhere he goes, God blesses him. While he's in prison, he interprets some dreams of the Pharaoh's men. They end up getting they get pulled out of the prison. One of them is killed, one of them is reinstated. The one that's reinstated, even though he forgets about him initially, he remembers him later, and he tells the Pharaoh when the Pharaoh has a dream. Pharaoh pulls Joseph out. Joseph tells him his dream. Joseph goes from being in prison one day to the prime minister the next day. Okay, and then we start the long interaction of the famine starts. His brothers come to Egypt because of Joseph and God. Egypt's the only place that has anything to eat. So his brothers come down. His father comes down. They get the entire land of Goshen, which is the agricultural area of Egypt. They spend 400 years there. Okay. 400 years later, we're introduced to Moses. Okay. Moses is a baby at the time when all the Hebrew babies are getting killed because the Israelites have grown too numerous. Moses' mother puts him in a little ark and puts him in the Nile River. It floats up the river. The Pharaoh's daughter finds him and adopts him. He ends up getting raised by his own mother because his sister Miriam follows him down the river and is like, "Hey, I know somebody that can watch the baby for you." So he gets raised by his own mother. When he is an adult, around 40, he sees an altercation between a Hebrew and an Egyptian. He ends up killing the Egyptian, and they want his head for that. And so he flees. He flees from here. He flees from somewhere in here. 30 and 31 are the two capital cities around that time. It kind of changes. Uh, it changed from when Joseph got there to when the plagues were happening. Every time new pharaohs would come up, they'd build a new palace and new temples and all that stuff, because they treated their pharaohs like gods. So I'm not totally sure which one it is, but it's one of these two. There's a couple of them, but these are the two ones that are down there. Moses leaves because they're trying to kill him, and he comes over here to. Okay, we're out of Genesis at this point. That's why you're not seeing the locations, Josh. All right, so we all up to speed on Genesis. I know I blazed through it, but if only I had went through that fast, all the rest of them. Okay, so somehow I have a dropped pin in Texas that has shown up on my Exodus locations. Yeah, I don't think they made it that far. All right, so let's get zoomed in here a little bit. All right, perfect. So Moses flees. He is no doubt in this area somewhere. He flees to Midian. Okay, so he comes all the way across the Sinai Peninsula. Down here on the southwest corner of Israel, this is called the Negev. And you've got Paran, and we're going to get into, when we get into Numbers, we'll talk about Edom and Moab and the Ammonites. But anyways, he comes all the way around here down to Midian, and oh wow, landed right on it. And we're introduced to him coming into Midian at a well. He meets Jethro, which we find out later is like a title. It's not really his name. It's a title of probably the king of Midian. It says the prince of Midian. It seems like maybe around that time. That's just they had or not prince, a priest of Midian. Anyway, so he saves Jethro's daughter. Jethro's daughter goes back and tells her dad, and he's like, "Where's this man?" Anyways, he ends up marrying into this family. He spends 40 years here. Okay, in 40 years, he is going to be taking care of Jethro's animals. He has some kids. He has 2 kids in there, but he's taking care of Jethro's animals. And one day, while he's doing that, he sees a bush that is burning up. It's not burning up. It's on fire, but it's not burning up. And he turns to the side, and God begins to talk to him out of this bush. You all know the story. Take off your sandals. You're on holy ground. He tells Moses, "I'm going to send you to Egypt to get my people out. They've been crying out to me. I've heard them. It's time. Everything that I said 400 years ago to their ancestors, now it's time for them to get out." Okay, so of course he's like, "Well, I can't talk," even though he was no doubt super highly trained. He was, the most educated person in 200 miles probably, but he said, "I can't talk." So he ends up, his brother comes to meet him out of the blue 40 years later because God called him. They both go. Then this is the story of the 10 plagues. So we're going to go through all 10 plagues, culminating with the death of the firstborn. Finally, at the death of the firstborn, they let Israel go. They don't just let them go, they send them away with tons of stuff. They load them down. And we know they loaded them down because not even a year later, no time to mine, no time to collect any of this stuff, they're building the tabernacle, and it's like $160 million tabernacle, equivalent to today's money. So, like, they were slaves and one day, and then very rich the next day. So they get sent out. They go across the Sinai Peninsula. Again, traditional Christianity puts all this happening in the Sinai Peninsula. But if you try to follow where traditional Christianity has always put it, it doesn't really line up. And so I chose not to teach y'all that one. I just kind of mention it. I think that the actual crossing and Mount Sinai, where's my cursor? There it is. Come on, you can do it. Nope, over here. I think the actual crossing, Mount Sinai, all of this stuff is happening in Saudi Arabia, which is this area right over here. Okay, so Midian is down here. This is Al Bad, that's in Saudi Arabia, and that is ancient Midian. And they still call, like, I don't know what you would call it, that region is still called Midian. Anyway, so they end up coming all the way through the Sinai Peninsula, which is this upside down triangle right here. This is all large mountain ranges. They come to this place called Pi Hahiroth or something like that, which just means like two peaks. At this beach, Nuweiba, walking into this beach, there are two peaks on either side of a very narrow road that are, I think they're like 1,200-foot peaks, and it's not a very wide entrance, and then it goes up both sides. So there's no way to go. And in the scripture, when you read in Exodus, they're like, we have the sea behind us and mountains to the side of us and Egypt in front of us. So there's nowhere to go. So I think that one makes the most sense, and a lot of people agree with me. So they're there. This is the first time that they're going to complain. They're going to be like, wow, God, you brought us all the way out here to kill us. Great. But God puts a darkness between them, and then he has a wind come through and opens up the area in the Gulf of Aqaba. This is the Gulf of Aqaba right here. He opens up an area between Nuweiba and Ras Al Hasha, which is the only place in all of the Gulf of Aqaba. This is a huge, very deep gulf. I mean, like 1,800 meters in some places, and it's a very sharp drop. However, funny enough, between Nuweiba and Ras Al Hasha, it is a slow drop. Remember, I made the joke. I actually did the measurements, and it's ADA approved. That could be a wheelchair ramp when God dried it out. On one side, it's a little steep on the other side, but pretty well could be a wheelchair ramp because it's about 11 miles across, and it's only 400 meters deep. So like still deep, but across 11 miles, not that deep.
How deep would that be in feet?
400 meters, like 1,200 feet. It's big. It's 120 stories. That's a giant skyscraper underwater, and you can imagine being at the base of that with these mountains of water on either side of you.
Make you a little nervous.
Yeah. But somehow the Israelites go through all of that and still, have an issue with God over and over again.
Of them were crossing?
So your Bible is going to say 600,000 footmen. So that's talking about the men that are of warring age. So like 20 and up, 20 to, or maybe just be 20 and up, but 600,000 footmen. If you multiply that by whatever the number is, I think it's like 2.5 or 3, something like that. Yeah, the women, children, all that stuff. That's where they get like 3 million Israelites crossing.
Okay.
I disagree with that. I think that the word that is used for thousands, so there's 600,000 footmen essentially. The word for thousand, elaf, can also be used for like units, like military units or clans. And so you think like the horn, if you took the horns and like kind of my extended family and you took all the men, we've got anywhere between 8 and 20 men that are of fighting age.
Right.
Okay, well, if you take that approach to it, then the Israeli army is between 6 and 12,000 men, and that would put the entire population around 60,000. Okay, I wouldn't fight over it because I don't think it's really necessary.
Yeah,
However, um, if there were 3 million of them and they had a 600,000 man army, then they would have been the biggest army by far walking into Canaan.
the reason I asked is, I wonder how many days or how long it would take them to cross that
It's 6 hours is how long it took them to cross it.
6 hours.
Yeah,
That many
because
people.
it's dark, and then when the sun comes up, God closes the water.
Wow.
Okay. Um, so, anyways, I think most likely there were about 60,000 Israelites that crossed. That also makes sense multiple places in the Old Testament where they're the smallest nation and all this. If they had 600,000, they could have just ran through,
Yeah,
uh,
later on when they divided the
Canaan,
camp.
and no big deal. But they didn't. We'll see when we get into Numbers. They get hit constantly and defeated until God is with them, and then all of a sudden they're able to take everything.
Right.
If they're that much bigger than everybody else, then it's not so much of a mystery why they took everything over. Anyway, so they get across. They're going to spend a little bit of time going down. They go to Midian, and we have the story about the bitter waters at Mara and Elim, and then they're going to run around to this side, and then we've got Mount. Nope, nope, still nope. Come on, you can do it. There we go. Jabal Makla, which means burnt mountain. Um, I think this is Mount Sinai. They finally loop all the way around. They've got one little battle on the north side of Sinai at Rephidim. And then when they get around to the east side of the mountain, that's where they're going to stay. They're going to sit there for a year. That's where they build the first tabernacle. Okay, it's going to sit there. It's going to sit there for the entire book of Leviticus. Okay, where Leviticus doesn't talk about movement at all. Okay, I think all of this we're going to see in Deuteronomy that all of this was written at Mount Nebo by Moses right before he dies. He writes all of these books. Okay, um, so I mean, they don't quite go in order. Genesis is definitely in order. Exodus is in order. I think Leviticus happens, right around the same time as the end of Exodus, right when he's getting all the tabernacle stuff. Uh, we went through, we went through and we looked at every piece of the tabernacle, right? We talked about it's $160 million modern day money, very heavy, very intricate, gold everywhere, tent in the middle of nowhere. Well, while Moses is up on Sinai getting all of this instruction, God's like, okay, the people have already lost their minds. You got to go down. And he goes down. Of course, they have melted their jewelry down. They're naked, dancing around this thing. He's like, okay, who's going to help me put down this rebellion? The Levites stand with him. They kill, I don't think it tells us, but they kill quite a few of their brothers and sisters that are acting crazy. Because of that, originally all of Israel was supposed to be a kingdom of priests. Okay, but because of that, God takes the Levites and makes them the priests. Okay, because they answer the call.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
It might be a dumb question.
I'm up for dumb questions.
The
I,
Levites are basically everybody except Israelites, right?
mm,
No.
nope, nope. You're
They're just
thinking,
a tribe of Israel.
yes, Levi was one of Jacob's or Israel's sons.
And there's 9 tribes?
12,
12.
13 actually. They generally don't count Levi because it's set apart for God. They didn't count Joseph because on his deathbed, Joseph's father adopts his 2 sons in the place of Joseph. Okay, so when you look at anytime when the land gets divvied up, instead of Joseph, you have Ephraim and Manasseh. And because Levi doesn't have an inheritance, you end back up with 12 tribes. Okay. I can't, for some reason, for the life of me. Oh, Gentiles is what you're thinking of. Yeah. So Jews and Gentiles. Jews are all the Israelites. Gentiles is everybody else. Okay. But that is not till much later. Golden calf. Okay, so that's the end of Exodus. He takes and he burns that golden calf and he puts it in water and he makes everybody drink it. Makes them sick, which is pretty cool. This is the last one that we took. Last one that we went through was Leviticus. These are, we get introduced to all the offerings. It goes through the burnt offerings, the sin offerings, there's 5 of them, 5 main offerings that we go all the way through. We're going to find out about the priesthood, how the priests are going to get put into office, their duties, their responsibilities, all that. Then we're going to go through a lot of laws. I think there were, so in Exodus, we get about 111 laws. In Leviticus, we've got 247 different laws. So we get a lot of laws in Leviticus. Leviticus is also where we are introduced to, hold on, I'm trying to find it. Leviticus is also where we are introduced to the different festivals and Sabbath days. So we've got Shabbat, Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, Feast of Booths. And then I went through and I showed you how the Passion Week, or the week that Jesus died on the cross, perfectly lines up with all these different things. And I showed you how the different New Testament scriptures point back to the truths that were predicted in the Old Testament festivals. So, let's see. So we've got that. Let's see if that pretty well gets everything. Yeah, so the main focus of Leviticus was holiness and what it meant to be set apart. We also got what happens with the consequences if they break these laws, and then he talks just a little bit about vows. Almost the entire book of Leviticus is God talking. And Yahweh said to Moses, Yahweh said to Moses, and Yahweh said to Moses. Exodus is more narrative. There's a lot of and Yahweh said to Moses. Numbers, there's a lot of the Yahweh said to Moses, but it's also a lot of narrative. Okay. Leviticus is almost all, with the exception of I think I added it up. It was like 29 verses that aren't just direct quotes from God. So I wonder it's the holy book of the Bible, right? Questions? That catches us up. So
Yeah, the Jews, they
what?
They honor a lot of these laws, like the.
Yes, since the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, they don't have a place to offer sacrifices. So that's where the Talmud, which is modern Judaism, has come from. I think Talmudic, I think is what they call it, but that's modern Judaism. In 800 to 1400 AD, modern Judaism blew up. Okay, they have like 10,000 laws. Okay, they made laws on laws on laws. Um, but they couldn't keep a lot of the stuff that was given to them in Leviticus. So that was the best they could do.
Okay,
Wasn't the best they could do. They could have followed Jesus, but
and now we celebrate some of those things too, don't we?
yeah, yeah. Hold on,
So,
I can take you back.
so how did we come about picking out ours
Um,
and not theirs?
so there's 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 really nothing that we have an issue with celebrating. Um, Generally, we don't celebrate this stuff. Um, Passover becomes the Pesach, um, which is what we call Easter. Okay,
Right.
so to the
Is
Christians,
that where it transforms from Old Testament to New Testament?
well, what happened on Passover in like 31 AD is what transforms from Old to New
Oh,
Testament.
I meant our laws, or our celebrations, or you know how we celebrate compared to the Jewish faith.
Well, the difference is they were required to do those things because um, they were prophetic of a future to come. Okay, after the cross, a lot of the law was fulfilled through him.
Right.
Okay, and he hasn't done all of these. You know, we've seen where he did Passover and first fruits, and for sure Pentecost, but um, we haven't really seen Feast of Trumpets. I don't even think that we've seen the Day of Atonement.
I was wondering about that
I
one.
think that is the finalization of sin and death.
Okay.
Feast of Booths.
Now they do practice that one, don't they? The Feast of Booths. Isn't that where they have
the
like
Jews.
yeah, a booth?
Yeah, they have
They
it.
go
It's a
for like
tent.
10 days
It's like
or
the Feast
whatever.
of Tents. Um, I don't think it's 10 days. I think
Right.
it's 7 days. But
That
September,
works.
October, they are outside in tents. They're not supposed to live in a permanent dwelling, and that's to remember everything
Right.
that happens in Numbers and Deuteronomy.
That stuck out in my head. I remember that part.
Yeah. So we're good.
Yep.
Up to speed.
I think so.
Moving on.
You're never allowed to ask again. So. All right. Let's get it.
I think Leviticus was probably the hardest book out of all those.
Just wait till we get to the history of Israel. So it's going to be from here once we get through Deuteronomy, which I don't think we'll get to tonight because I've already taken an hour. Once we get to Deuteronomy, get through Deuteronomy, Joshua has lots of movement. Judges has not too much movement, but there's a lot of big stories in there that we're going to hit on. Um, Ruth is very important. Then we're going to start moving into um, Samuel and Kings and Chronicles. Samuel is pretty linear, meaning that it starts with we meet Samuel, and then we've got Saul and David, and everything happens with David. However, Kings and Chronicles happen at the same time. Okay, and all the prophets happen at that same time. So the history of Israel, it's going to take us a couple months probably to get through um, the kings, because at the same time that we're going to be talking about like each king, we're going to be talking about the prophets at that time and what was going on with the history. So Leviticus is tough, and there's a lot to remember, and you're probably never going to remember everything, but that's kind of the point.
Kings, isn't that where they went back and forth through that time?
Kings and Chronicles. So you have the Book of the Kings and you have the Chronicles of the Kings. Well, those are written by two different people about the same events.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's lots of overlay, and then you also have all the prophets during each section. So like we'll be talking about Hezekiah and Isaiah at the same time. And Hezekiah is in Kings and Chronicles and Isaiah. So we're going to be bouncing all over the place.
Isn't he in the New Testament too?
No,
They were mentioning it there a couple of times.
they may mention him. I don't know where they would mention him. Maybe in Acts, but I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay, so numbers, facts. This is the 7th longest book in the Bible. We got 36 chapters, 1,288 some odd verses. Again, we think this was written by Moses. They based that off of somewhere in Deuteronomy. I can't remember. There's a lot of locations. They move quite a bit in numbers. We call it numbers. The Jews did not call it numbers. They called it the wilderness, because a majority of this story is the wilderness. Okay. So we're going to talk about census and organization. We're going to talk about laws, and then we're going to talk about the wilderness journey. Okay, those are the highlights. There's a bunch of stories. The main stories are Israel screwing up. They're going to do that again and again. I think 8.
On their travel through the wilderness.
Yeah, I think 8 times they're going to do it, and on the 10th time, God's like, "That's it. I've had enough. You're all going to die here, and your kids are going to go into the into the promised land." Okay, so first thing that we have, and I guess this is why we call it numbers. There are 2 censuses that are taken in here. The first census happens right in chapter 1. Yahweh says, "Take a census, yada yada, from 20 years old and upward." And verse 4, he separates them by tribe and he counts them. And I went ahead and put on the mentioned leaders here. Nothing super important about these mentioned leaders. There's going to be something. I underlined Judah because Nahshon is in the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew, and he was in this first census. So we talked about this just a couple minutes ago. Since we're about to get into the census numbers, I felt like this was a good time to bring it back up. The Hebrew word alaf can mean 1,000 or clan. 10 to 20 fighting men would be clan. Okay, and Hebrew is not the only language that has this ambiguity. Greek has the same ambiguity. Okay, 1,000 can mean 1,000, but it can also mean like a troop. Okay, and it does. Remember when we talked about the Bible? Our current Old Testaments are based off of the Masoretic text, which is Masorite means tradition in Hebrew. The traditional, the oral history passed down in like 300 AD, something like that. They finally assembled it all in Hebrew, and they went back to using that. Well, that's what most of our Old Testaments are based off of now. Now, 600 to 800 years before that, 70 different Hebrew rabbis got together and translated or wrote down and translated the oral teachings of Judaism into what we call the Septuagint, which just means 70 in Greek. They translated all of the Hebrew into Greek back then. All 70 agreed. Okay. However, there's definitely some smoothing that they did with some odds and end things. It's mostly numbers. If you read the Septuagint, one of the places that the numbers just don't work out is when they're talking about the like Adam's age all the way through Noah's ages. If you add all those numbers together, what you end up with is Methuselah dying after the flood, which doesn't make sense because that scripture doesn't say that. Scripture says it was Noah and his, 7 family members, right? It wasn't his, I think that was his father. Or maybe it was his grandfather. Can't remember at the moment. Anyway, so there's one issue. The other issue is this counting thing, and I think this is a remnant of the scribes doing the Septuagint or even passing down the oral history. They had some writings, of course, but as they passed that down, I think that's what has caused this numerical issue. The reason I think that is because Hebrew grammar allows for them to have been clear the whole time, to use words that were definitely thousand. There was no alternative. Uh, However, at times it's rigid. Like when they say 600,000 fighting men, the grammar has all those words locked together to where it can only mean thousand. However, when they're doing the census, a lot of the times um, it'll say like 7,700 men is how it's written. So it could be or 7 tribes of 700 men, that kind of thing. And if you look archaeologically, there's no remnant. They haven't found remnants of 3 million people wandering around that desert in the Bronze Age.
Did they write anything down on scrolls back then?
Oh yeah, everything was on scrolls.
And did any of them survive? Or have they?
So in 1960, we found the Dead Sea Scrolls,
Yeah.
which is like 11,000 fragments.
I thought they found some a little bit older than that.
Well, they found them in 1960. They're from, they're almost 2,000 years old.
Yeah, I was saying that they found some other scrolls that were.
We have leftover fragments, but the Septuagint is really the oldest stuff that we have,
Okay.
and that's like 250 BC.
Yeah.
That's when they were translating it to Greek. We don't have a lot of stuff that predates that. Does that answer your question?
No. What I was asking, have they found any other scrolls since the 60s?
No, I think they found a lot of that was the last major find when it comes to Old Testament.
Okay.
Okay, so they
That's my
found
question.
different not manuscripts but copies of a lot of the New Testament writings in some like Catholic churches around the Israel area.
I'm surprised that it'd be Catholic.
Well, they came out of the Christian. If you trace our lineage back, we go back through Martin Luther and the Catholic Church and all of them. It's just the Martin Luther and the Protestants didn't agree with what the Catholics were doing on
Right.
it.
No, I was thinking that it'd be more in Israel, or the Jewish people would have it.
Well, I'm talking about Christian manuscripts, not Jewish. I'm talking about like Paul's copies of Paul's letters. They found in the 400 AD or 1100 AD, that kind of stuff. The letters spread all out from Rome and Galatia and Ephesus and all those places, and they went all the way down to Egypt and Alexandria, and then kind of stopped along the way, and we found them in old churches generally.
Okay.
Like they'll have them stored somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that this is confusing, the word elaph is confusing, is because of scribes. I think one of them was rewriting it. He was like, "What in the world did they mean here?" Well, and so he just assumed and he wrote it, but they weren't consistent with it. And now that archaeologists aren't finding records of 3 million people But they do find plenty of records of a big caravan of like 60,000. Okay,
Hmm.
so they find trash. They're looking
Yeah.
for pottery and other things like that, and they have found that at places over in Saudi Arabia and the Negev, southern Israel, that kind of thing. So I don't really think it matters. Either way, either
No.
Israel was small and God did a miracle by taking over Canaan, or Israel was really big and God did a miracle by them not starving to death in the desert. I mean,
Just one of
like,
those fun
yeah,
facts.
pick your poison. I don't care. Um, Anyways, but I think there are more scriptures that back up my side of it. Fewest of all people, Israel faces nations greater. How can Jacob stand? He's so small. You know, if he was that big, he wouldn't have been small. So, all right. So, they're counted. The clans are counted, or the people are counted, however you want to look at it. Um, which clearly I wanted you to look at it a certain way because I have like 3 slides here dedicated to it being that way. So, the traditional reading and what your Bible will say is coming out of and like the end of Exodus 12, something like that. There were 603,000 fighting men or footmen, is the word used. And then I told you if you expand that out, if you expand that out into women and children, then that becomes like a 2 or 3 million total. The clan reading, the one that I'm saying, instead of viewing it as thousands, you're viewing it as clans. That puts it at like 5,550 fighting men is what some people estimate the clans as. That'd be like 10 fighting men per clan. You can double that figure, and that's how I was at the 60,000 mark. Because different scholars will say, well, the clan would be 10 fighting men. Some of them say 20. So you double it. So between 30,000 to 60,000 men, or 30,000 to 60,000 total Israelites going through. Um, Again, this is verse 46 is where I'm telling you it's grammatically ambiguous. You've got 600 Elaphs and 500 men. And so that can be read as 600 thousandths or 600 thousands and 500 men, or 600 clans of 500 men, or totaling 500 men. Like there's real ambiguity in it. The Greek, the LXX is it's 70 in Roman numerals. That's the Septuagint. It doesn't clear it up. It's still ambiguous. So they weren't really sure then, I don't think. But the population, when you're looking at 600K, I think it stretches way too far outside the usual non-modern populations to develop. Okay, so we could, in current years, and again, like I'm not saying that this is necessarily wrong. I think the Bible tends to lean towards it being wrong, but it doesn't really affect the Bible, I don't think. God could have made it to where the Israelites were super blessed because it does say that God made them plentiful. But for a 400-year time, we've got roughly 17, 25-year generations. Um, Infant mortality was a huge thing. And then them being slaves on top of that, and then you have plague and famine and people not living very long because of just the day. We talked about the Egyptian medicine and all the garbage that they were doing. Like it's a wonder anybody survived anything. Um, Counting all those in, traditionally, then they would have only been around. They would have barely made it to 2,000 men. Okay. So even the 6,000 men or 12,000 men is an elevated population. Okay. So just because the Bible says that God blessed them and they were abundant, I'm not discrediting that part of it. Even the number that I'm saying is more than the average for the Bronze Age, that time period. However, to get 600,000, you can see my cursor? Oh, here we go. This blue line would be normal. This is what all the history that we have suggests. This is how populations grow over 400 years. Okay. This is, this is the 5 to 10,000 men mark. This is the 5,000 men. So like, this is still growing a lot faster than traditional. So God, very well could have blessed them, and they're still showing up this number. So that's not out of alignment with Scripture. This number is just ridiculous. Okay, this graph stops at 10,000. Okay, it's going straight up because 600,000 is way up here. Okay, so I think that's the last time I'm going to bother you with the ELAF thing, in numbers at least. But I've made my pitch. Okay, so Yahweh tells Moses, we're in chapter 2, Yahweh tells Moses how to arrange the encampments around the tabernacle. And then, of course, the movements, they happen in the reverse order. That's not right. That's not right at all. The movements happen in the same order. I need to change that. So we've got Judah, Issachar, Zebulon, Reuben, Simeon, Gad, and Levi is encamped around the tabernacle, and then the rest of them. Does that make sense to y'all? It also gives us the directionality. I put this compass up here in the top corner. I keep forgetting that they can't see my cursor. They can't see when I point at the TV. So I put the directionality up here so that you have a general idea. The tabernacle always opened to the east. Okay, the gate was always facing the east. And they were always in this order. Now, if you notice, there is a very specific shape that this makes that a lot of people love to draw attention to. And we'll get a little bit further, and there's an even more interesting part of this cross that is formed around the tabernacle. Because do you remember Matthew 26, where Jesus was pierced on his right side? Well, if Jesus was on this cross, his right side would be right here. And this is a portion of Levi, the southern portion to be specific. And then 4, which is Reuben. Here in a little bit, we're going to see a story of where the southern group of the Levites and one of the groups of Reuben do something, and they end up getting sucked into the earth in a massive hole, which just happens to be on the right side, which I thought was interesting. Uh-oh, I've got Elaph again. Yahweh tells Moses he's claimed the Levites instead of all of Israel's firstborn. So this is recounting what happened because of the golden calf, because the Levites stood up. Now, instead of all of Israel's firstborns, God is just taking the Levites, and the number almost adds up perfectly to where all the Levites was equivalent to everybody's firstborns. There was a little bit over. It was 273 over, and they had to be redeemed. So the rest of the group paid 5 shekels per head to redeem the 273 in excess. That makes sense? No. Okay. Where'd you lose me at?
Say that one more time.
Okay. So originally, because God killed all the firstborns in Egypt, he had redeemed all the firstborns of the Israelites. They were going to be for his purpose, meaning they were going to be the priests. Okay. Because of all the junk that happened with the golden calf at the base of Sinai, and the Levites being the one that answered Moses' call to put down the heathens that were rebelling. Now, instead of all the firstborn, it's just the Levites that are going to be the priests. Okay? Well, the total number of Levites was 22 elaph, or 22,273. Okay? The total number of firstborns of all of Israel was 22,273. So those numbers were 273 off. Okay? And so he said, I'm going to keep all the Levites, but your number is 273 high. So you've got to pay 5 shekels per person. So 5 times 273 to redeem that extra. Did you follow that one? Okay. All right, so Yahweh gives instructions for moving the tabernacle. He goes through. Now remember, the holy objects only the Levites can touch, and we saw all that in Exodus and Leviticus. We're gonna see it again in Numbers. He's gonna talk about it a little bit later, but only the Aaron's son, not the Levites, only Aaron's sons, the priest, could touch the holy objects. Okay, the Levites were all in service to the tabernacle and the temple later, but only Aaron's sons could touch the holy objects. Okay, if anybody else touched them, they died. Okay, dead. They couldn't even see them. The priests, when it came time to move the tabernacle, they had to cover everything up and get it, prepared, and then the rest of the Levites would come in and move the stuff. Okay? And then when they would get to the next place, they would place it in, and then the priest would set it up.
Now, did they have a group that would prepare the ground before everything went? That they had to, didn't they?
They would have had to. It's a very construction man,
Yeah.
question. I don't think the Bible actually talks about preparing the
I've
ground.
never seen it.
Why are you tired? You just work all the time.
I ain't been to work.
Get it together, Isaac. There's tea. You want sweet tea? I got some Febreze and spray in your tea that'll wake you up. We'll put you in a coma one. We're really rolling the dice here, but let me see. It's been over an hour. Then we'll take a couple minute break. Anybody need a bathroom break? Water break? You want me to get you a water, or you want some tea?
No.
Are you just gonna take it dry, savage? All right.
I don't know how people do that.
Only the horns in particular, we have esophagus problems, and I can't swallow.
Me too. I choke on tea.
I choke on water if I drink it too fast.
Me too.
I'm not even joking. I swear to God, I can choke on water if I drink it too fast.
Especially if it's cold water. For some reason it locks me up.
That is the honest to goodness truth. So shows we got 2 people watching.
All right.
Hey guys, we're taking a break. Taking a quick break. We'll be right back at it. If you have questions online, you can always put them on here. I'll check from time to time, and I'll try to answer them if you have them.
It's traditionally 22,000, but elapse it would be 273. You said.
So traditionally, it's 22,273. But the ELAF reading would be like 22,000, or it would be 22 groups, clans, units, totaling 273.
Now, when the different tribes were, set out in their position, did they have more people on the outskirts of them?
Let me see.
Look like
Let's
like
go
a
back.
town around them?
Uh, yes, actually. It wasn't just the Israelites that left Egypt. Some of the Egyptians came with them.
Right.
Now, the Israelites had to be camped like this. They were instructed specifically, but there was an outskirts of the camp, and we're actually going to see that mentioned here a little bit later in Numbers because the people in the outskirts were trouble, and they
Would
caused problems.
those be considered the Gentiles at that time?
I don't think that word was used, but yes, yes.
Okay.
Um, and we talked about it in Exodus, but I think that Pharaoh's daughter, um, that adopted Moses, actually went with him.
Yeah,
We see, I think it's in Samuel, that
and they said that he did have a lot of followers too.
yeah. So
He went with the Gentiles.
Who?
Pharaoh's, the guy that adopted Pharaoh's daughter. He went with the Gentiles.
Pharaoh's daughter adopted Moses, and she went with the Jews when they left Egypt.
And a lot of them were so impressed by the plagues, or not impressed, but I guess they were what, touched by the Holy Spirit? Did you say?
I don't know, but I think impressed is a fair word. You imagine, you've been worshiping everything under the sun, and all of a sudden, these people that were slaves that have been like, well, we worship the only God, and you're like,
Nothing happens to them, and everybody else.
yeah, you're like, well, they might be onto something. We worship these 500 other gods, but their only God that we haven't seen is he's doing
Yeah.
some big things. So
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that would be an eye opener.
yeah. Anyway, so finishing up, so they give us Yahweh gives Moses the instruction on the Levites what order they're supposed to go in. So they have a very specific when it comes time to move the tabernacle. Um, they head out in this same order. Like I said, I need to change that, but they would blow the trumpet twice, and when they would blow the trumpet twice, um, they tore down and they were going to start moving. And Judah would head out, and Issachar would head out, and Zebulon would head out, and then we would have Reuben, and we would have Simeon and Gad, and then we would have the Levites move in.
What are those, I'm sorry, what are those numbers along the, look like the
So
156D?
this was the. Let me move this so you can see. So you're trying to look around me. This was this is ELAF. So if you go off of the totals for the first census, this group had 156,100.
Okay.
Okay, which another thing like that makes no sense. The numbers, they don't make sense unless you look at them as 156 groups of 1,500, totaling 1,500.
156 groups, 1,500.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
A lot of people.
yeah. So, but I mean, if you look at it as the 3 million, you've got 157,500 over here. You've got 151,450 on that side. Down here, you've got 186,400, and then up here, you've got 108,100. A lot of people. That total adds to the 600,000.
Right.
Okay. But does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, we'll keep going. All right, so they head out. The Levites are going in a specific order. Let me see. Moses is reminded to keep the unclean out of the camp, so there's no defilement. This is going back to the leprosy. We talked about leprosy being not leprosy in the sense that we know leprosy, but leprosy in a spiritual affliction because of hidden sin. Okay, and we're going to see in a couple chapters one example, a very clear example of it being a spiritual affliction because um, one of the most prominent people in the entire camp gets it
because she makes God mad.
Okay.
Okay, so verse 11. So we go through. It's kind of a weird excerpt here where it's talking about jealousy testing. Okay, so if you felt like it says if you have the spirit of jealousy come on you, something like that, you felt like your spouse is cheating on you, and he's talking to the men, like you felt like your wife is cheating on you, um, you can come to the tabernacle and the priests are going to make this special concoction that the woman's going to drink, and she has to say like they write a vow, and then the ink gets washed off into the drink, and she drinks the drink and says the vow. And if she's being honest and she has not cheated, then she's good to go. But if she's lying, then her thighs shrivel up and her belly swells, and it tells you that like she has been defiled. She's defiled herself by cheating.
Which, I guess we can bring it up Sunday. We can see if anybody's willing to try it. We can see if that's still going on.
Yeah, I'll take a test.
I'll take a test. Pregnancy tests were weird back in the day. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, it's a pregnancy
No.
test.
It's a jealousy test. I just thought it was funny.
Phil's like, I definitely can't take that.
Yeah, I might be a lot of things, but I'm not that way.
Here, this is just further explaining what I just said. The priest will write the curse on a scroll, and then he washes the ink off into the water, and she drinks it. And if she's telling the truth, then nothing. But if she's not telling the truth, then she's gonna have a bad time. Chapter 6 of Numbers, we're introduced to the law of the Nazarites. This is coming from the Hebrew word nazir, which means to separate. They had very specific things they couldn't do. One thing is they couldn't touch any product of the vine, and by that I mean grapevine. Wine, strong drink, vinegar, grape juice, raisins. If it came from the vine, they couldn't touch it.
And these were just the Nazarites?
Yep. Some people took Nazarite vows. Some of them took it for their whole life. Others took it for a certain period of time. I don't have a lot of information on this. I didn't dig into it too much. I know probably the most. I'm trying to think if there's even any others that I can think of in the Bible. But Samson was a Nazarite. Okay, he had from his parents from before he was born. They were told that he was going to do the Nazarite vow, and that he couldn't. One thing is you can't shave your hair. Your hair just is free to grow out the entire time. They're not allowed to go near a dead person during the vow, which brings up interesting questions because like Samson killed a lot of people. How did he manage that? And not go near them?
Are there some of the Jewish faith who still practice the Nazarite?
I don't know. I don't know that. That's a good question.
Well, because I was wondering, some of them the men don't cut their hair, they don't shave.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing?
I don't know. I know some of the more Orthodox
Radical.
the Jews, they do it. There's several different sects of Judaism. You've got like the ultra Orthodox that do as much as they can in line with the Bible. Of course, they can't do it all because they don't have a temple.
Right.
There's no active priesthood. There's no place for them to do sacrifices.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, who would they consider themselves like a member of one of the 12 tribes?
Oh yeah, no, they still track that. They know who's who.
Okay.
Yeah, they know who the Levites are. They know
Oh, that's interesting.
They know the Aaron.
They know their lineage then.
Yeah, they know who's Aaron's bloodline. So when the time comes, they have already. We talked about it a little bit in Exodus. the Temple Institute talks about a lot of this stuff in preparation for the new temple, because it's going to happen at some point, right?
Right.
In preparation for the new temple, they've already built a lot of this stuff. They've built the menorah, they've built the incense, and they're working on getting the red heifer. I mean, like 15, 20 years ago, they were working on doing all this stuff. So now they're probably ready. You know, they know the bloodlines, they know who's able to serve and all that stuff.
Do you, well, this may not be the time for history, this question. Do you think that all that's going to come to play in the future?
Yeah. So that's the
I mean, look like it is here.
uh, kind of. It's not going to come to play for the long, because what's going to happen is there's going to be um, there's going to be a peace deal. Because
Yeah.
right now, um, they couldn't even rebuild the temple because they're not even allowed to pray where the temple is. Okay, in Jerusalem, right? Right now, it's a Muslim controlled compound. Okay, so they can't rebuild that temple because it's controlled by them. But before the tribulation, what happens is there's some peace deal. They're going to get to rebuild the temple, either there or maybe, some discovery that they're not quite in the right location, and so they're going to get to
Yeah.
build it. At the midpoint of the tribulation, the son of perdition, the Antichrist, whatever you want to call him, is going to stand up in the temple and demand to be worshipped. Okay, so the temple is definitely going to get rebuilt. A temple, not the temple. We're the temple, They're going to rebuild a temple in Jerusalem. And maybe they get to use it for a couple of years, but at the midpoint of the tribulation, they are going, the Antichrist is going to stand up and defile the temple by demanding that he be worshiped. Okay? When that happens, the Jews are going to, it's all going to click into line, and the Isaiah 53 prophecy, which is, grab your Bible, pull up Isaiah, I think it's 53. It's like, we esteemed him afflicted of God, but he was bruised for our transgressions. It's either Isaiah 53 or Isaiah 55. I'm thinking 53.
The suffering servant. That's Isaiah 53.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's it. So read that starting with we esteemed. It's like, we esteemed him afflicted of God, something like that.
Okay. 53.
Yes, sir. What's the verse, Alyssa? You found it? Yeah?
53:3 maybe. He was despised and abandoned by men, a man of great pain, familiar with sickness, and like one from whom the people hid their faces. He was despised and
Sounded
regarded for him.
sounded right. Have you found that he was bruised for our transgression part yet?
However, it was for sicknesses,
Oh.
he bore, and our pains did he carry.
Yeah, that's why I'm probably quoting
But he
King
was
James.
pierced for our offenses.
Yes.
Crushed for our wrongdoings.
Yeah. So go a couple
Yeah.
verses before that.
Oh.
What is it?
There.
Oh, from 3 to 5. This is what I got highlighted.
However, it was our sicknesses that he himself
Good.
bore.
Can I see yours, Phil? 3 to 5.
We're right there, but it might be a different version.
Yeah, I'm just quoting what most of the churches are going to quote, which is
King James.
King James. He's despised. Oh yeah. So here's what I'm talking about. 53 and 4. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. This is the Jews. This is Isaiah in the past talking about the Jews in our future. Okay, they have not said this yet. They're gonna say this when the Antichrist steps up in the temple and demands to be worshipped. They're gonna say somebody is gonna say this very line that Isaiah is prophesying. They're gonna say, um, surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. We did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. The Jews thought Jesus died because he blasphemed God, because he claimed to be God. He claimed to be the Son of God. They thought he died because God cursed him. They had a thing, cursed is somebody that hangs upon a tree. Like
Yeah.
all the stars aligned. They thought God was cursing Jesus. But at some point in our future, at the tribulation, they're going to say, we thought all that, but he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. See, a lot of people think that came to pass at the cross. What they're talking about, what happened at the cross, but that has not come to pass. That is in our future. All right. So that answers your question. Yes, the
Yeah.
temple will be rebuilt. It's not gonna be around long.
Okay. And they'll have it just like it's described in the Bible.
Yeah. So they believe the Ethiopians have the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
Okay, they believe when they heard about Jesus, they were coming to Jerusalem to find out. Philip, we had this story of Philip getting like he goes and meets this eunuch on the road, an Ethiopian eunuch. What they believed is that eunuch was coming to be like, is it time to bring the ark back? The Messiah's come, right? And Philip's like, yes, the Messiah has come. No, it is not time to bring the ark back. Instead, now this is all that's transpired. He died, he ascended, he's going to come back again. When he comes back, that time is when we'll bring it back. Okay.
Okay.
So that's why they believe the Ethiopians have
What's the Ethiopian eunuch?
Eunuch is just like, I don't know if they physically maim themselves, but like they don't have reproductive parts, or they have just chosen they're like a monk. Okay, so the Nazarite vow.
Basically, they won't reproduce.
Yeah. Some of them did maim themselves, like Christian.
Yeah, because they were put in like harems, so they couldn't mess around with the women. Wasn't that?
I don't know.
I think that
Maybe.
that's how some of them.
I know, like Origen, the Greek. I think he was Greek.
Or guards.
He's
for the women.
He's either Greek or Egyptian. I'm not sure, but Origen was a Christian, like a 3 to 500 AD Christian, I think. He actually maimed himself. Okay, like chopped his stuff off because he felt like that was an ultimate act of, um, he didn't want any distractions from Christianity, which like more power to you, dude. I ain't me.
Well, isn't that true with some of them today when they take those like whips or those cat nine tails and they beat themselves on the back? Have you heard of those guys?
Man, I know, like some extreme Catholicism does that, but that wouldn't be the same. I'm talking about like cutting off your genitalia.
Yeah.
And that is in the Bible? That's like in the book? Or that's
Je-
just a story?
Jesus makes the point that some people are born eunuchs, some people are made eunuchs, and
Yeah.
some people are eunuchs just for the sake of, can't remember what he says, the gospel basically. Um, Origen took that to be like, he wanted to be the best Christian, so he was like, I'm going to make myself a eunuch. And
No, it's Origin. He's not in the Bible. He's just a guy from way back when. That's what you were saying.
he's a Christian. He's post all the New Testament scriptures. But but he's a Christian and he has lots of writings about the Bible. And in so I don't know, he might have been like 200 AD, I can't remember, but in the history talking about origin, that was one of the things. It's like he definitely cut off his genitalia because he was making himself a eunuch for the sake of Christianity. Do I believe that is required? No. You know, you can all take a deep breath.
God.
Isaac said he must have read that scripture that said if your right hand causes you to stumble, just cut it off.
You know, if that's what happened, like, bravo, dude. You know.
Yeah. Thank God for the cross.
Yeah. See if anybody's still on listening.
They probably
They
left.
might have hung up after that.
We'd like to welcome you to Riverside Roots. This is what the kind of stuff we talk about. There are
No
no.
shame in our game.
There's. Phil said no shame in our game. This is it gets interesting in these classes from time to time. We have some interesting conversations for sure. Okay, so back at it again. We're 30 minutes later and we have made it 4 chapters into the future. Okay. If they got devoured by a dead person, then they would have to shave once clean. On the 7th day after their unclean period, they would have to shave. Their vow would have been, totally done away with. They'd have to start over. Okay. And so that we see that happens with Samson when Delilah shaves his head. You know, he loses his strength because his power was in that vow, and we'll talk about that when we get to Judges. But then we get the instructions on the day, the 8th day. They're going to bring this. They're going to do the sin and a burnt offering and a guilt offering, and then all of their previous days of the vow are voided. It's like they never happened. So they're starting over. If they wanted to start over, they're going to start over. And then there's some, like I said, that did it for a specific time. It's like, I'm going to do this Nazarite thing for 2 years, 6 years, whatever. Once they got done, to complete it, to make it count, they had to do all these. They offered a 1-year-old male lamb for the burnt offering, a 1-year-old female lamb for the sin offering, a ram for a peace offering, and the basket with some unleavened cakes. Unleavened wafers, a grain and a drink offering. After the offerings, the Nazarite shall shave the dedicated hair, and they put it on the altar's fire with all the offerings. Okay, so like it was very specific. We don't have a lot of. I couldn't find much of anything on it. Why it was there, why they believe it was there. Like I said, Samson is probably the biggest one that everybody's going to know about. I think either John the Baptist or his father did the Nazarite vow too. But that's just off the top of my head.
Is Samson's story found in Samuel?
It's in Judges.
Judges.
He was one of the judges. Yeah. And then at the very end of chapter 6, we have this short blessing over the priests. Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is slow and long, but it basically identifies they have consecrated the tabernacle. We saw everything in the end of Exodus and Leviticus where they would go through and the priests consecrated, like they killed the bull and they put the bull's blood on the horns of the altars and all that stuff. The priests did all that. Now this is after all that has happened. The leaders of each tribe now are bringing an offering. They all bring the same offering, all 12 of them, and that is a 130 shekel silver dish, a 70 shekel silver bowl, both filled with fine flour mixed with oil for a grain offering. They had a 10 shekel gold pan full of incense, and of course this is the incense that
It was the recipes given in, I think, Leviticus. Maybe Exodus. Maybe Exodus.
Okay, so the people in the tribe would go to the tribal leader, present their offering to him, and then he'd present it to the priest.
Most likely, he gathered it up from the whole tribe because, like I
Yeah.
said, these are massive dedications that they're given. And remember, like, all of this is after the tabernacle. They have already raised, I told you, it's like $160 million worth of precious metals and
Right.
I didn't even count the jewels and all the other stuff. Just gold, silver, and bronze was like $160 million in today's market. Well, as much as silver has jumped up in the last couple of weeks, that you could actually double that. You could double that on the silver side. Um, anyways, but they brought a bull, a ram, a 1-year-old male lamb for the burnt offering. They brought a male goat for the sin offering. 2 oxen, 5 ram, 5 male goats, 5 male lambs, all 1-year-old for peace offerings. So in total, the tribal dedication was 24 bulls, 60 rams, 60 male goats, 60 male lambs, 1-year-old.
That would almost have to be an all day and all night
Yes,
thing.
yeah, and they brought them. They brought them one at a time, and Judah would bring theirs, and then Issachar brought theirs, and then
They'd have to
Reuben.
do the cleanup.
Yeah, that's why all the Levites were there to help. And the priests couldn't do it all. The Levites had to do some of the stuff.
The dirty work helps clean up.
Yep. Sometimes, like in the water of purification, the priests couldn't even do it because it made them unclean. They had to stand there and watch while somebody else did it. And the priest took the, we'll get to that, but the priest takes the blood and sprinkles it, and then somebody else cleans up the ashes and puts it in a clean place and water. And that ends up being the water that people purify themselves with. That's that red heifer that I was telling you they were actually raising in Texas like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
All right, sprinkle purifying water. That's the water that I was just talking about. This is cleansing the Levites. They've got to shave their whole body. They wash their clothes. They present the bull with its grain offering for a burnt offering and a second bull for a sin offering. They stand before Aaron and his sons as a wave offering. God sanctified them when He struck down the firstborns in Egypt. We talked about that a couple minutes ago. They have a very specific career from 25 to 50. They can't serve before 25, and they can only serve after 50 if they're helping other Levites, and that's like only for very, like isolated cases. You couldn't just work all your life. You were 25 to 50, and you were done.
What would they do after that?
I don't know. Great question. Golf. That's my guess. I don't think golf was actually around, but I don't know what they did, Phil. There's lots of agriculture at that time, so most likely they just were
Tended the farm.
tended their farms. They would have. They didn't have the Levites didn't have an inheritance section. They were in every tribal land, right? So, yeah. All right. So now in the second year of the Exodus, not the book of Exodus, but the leaving of Egypt, they're celebrating the Passover for the third time. Some men who were defiled requested approval to celebrate Passover anyways. So Moses checks with God. They had most likely they had been encountered a dead body, like they had had to bury somebody, and so now they're unclean. They're going to miss the Passover, okay? Because you can't do it if you're unclean. And so they're talking to. We're in chapter 9, verse 7. If you're looking for me,
Okay.
Numbers 9:7. Anyways,
because they were unclean, they were asking, well, I mean, so we just miss out, and of course God makes a way for them, and he puts it off a month. Um, if you didn't get to take part in Passover at the correct month, which is month 1, day 14, then you get a second chance to do it on month 2, day 14. Okay. Um, but this is only if you happen to be unclean on the first Passover or you were traveling. Okay, anyone else that just missed it because and they weren't unclean or traveling, they were cut off. They're supposed to be removed from Israel. Like you're out on your own. Good luck, buddy.
Is there any way they can come back in?
I don't think so. Never
Reference to it?
makes any reference to them being reinstated. Once you're out, you're out.
They were cut off for what? I missed it.
If they missed Passover and they didn't have a good reason, like you had to have your absentee ballot or you were in trouble.
I was caught up in you saying month 1 and month 2. That's what my mind was.
Well, I can
thinking.
say them, but it's the 14th day of Abib or the 14th day of ER. I mean, I didn't figure you knew the Jewish months, so we haven't talked about the Jewish calendar other than Abib, so I didn't figure you knew them.
No, I don't.
Actually,
I like month 1 better.
It's actually on the slide. ER is month 2. We don't speak Hebrew, so it can be kind of hard at times. I don't think this is the first time, but then we see the Bible makes mention that the tabernacle was constantly covered. Okay, the glory of God would come down at times in a way that like presented God to the whole congregation. But his glory was always shown directly above the tabernacle. During the day, all day long, it's a cloud. Okay. And all night long, it was a pillar of fire. And like, so, me and my brother were talking about it last night. It's like, how wild is it? All the things the Israelites did to disrespect God when every night they're going to bed with like this, giant flaming,
Being alive,
yeah. It's like it still gets cold. They're in the desert, but it still gets cold at night. They're not getting cold probably because they have this giant pillar of fire in the middle of their camp, and it's like, did God bring us out here to leave us? God bring us out here so we could die. It's like, he can hear you, dude. Shut up. Watch your mouth. We're not with them.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure they had to like tend the fire in the middle of the night and stuff.
No. This is above the tabernacle, floating in the air. A giant pillar of fire.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes, there was a.
I knew there was a cloud.
There was
smoke above it, but I didn't know there was fire.
Yeah. It's not smoke. It's a cloud. It's
No,
just God's glory.
Are they traveling when this
Yeah, I guess so.
went on?
Yes, it followed them.
So they're getting manna during the day, aren't they?
Yep, that happened all in Exodus. Every day they're going out and when the dew settles, there's manna on the ground.
Yeah.
They go and they collect it. They always get enough. They collect double on the 6th day. They don't collect any on the 7th day.
And where did they get the water, though? I mean, Moses struck the rock, but does it?
They move from time to time. They go to different oases.
Okay.
We'll look at some of their locations here in a second. Like Kadesh Barnea, I'll show you. That's an oasis. Yeah, I mean,
Or never ending, I guess.
not that big if it's 60,000 people. But if it's 3 million, yeah, it's going to be a pretty massive spring, right?
Right. Spend all day just getting water.
Mind blown.
Anyway, so that cloud when the cloud moved, they moved. Sometimes, the first time the tabernacle is set up, I think I have this in later, but the tabernacle sits there for 50 days the first time. Okay, on the 50th day, which again, like prophetic, what happened the 50 days after the cross? Pentecost.
Right.
Okay, it's like there's all these actions that happen, they're all happening on the same, sequence of days. 50 days after the tabernacle set up the first time, it's going to move. And then sometimes it would happen the next day, sometimes it would happen 3 days, whatever. When the cloud lifted and it moved, everybody packed up and they followed it. Okay.
Do they have any kind of warning?
I don't know. Go to read 9:17. What does that say? I don't have my Bible on me. I just have my notes.
And the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle, and then after that, the children of Israel journeyed, and in place where the cloud abode, there the children pitched their tents. Doesn't really say.
So it sounds to me like the cloud lifted and they picked up, and when it stopped, they stopped underneath it.
So that they had to see it rise
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Start to move.
But you would imagine, a giant flaming pillar in the middle of the night, if it just decides to get up and start walking away, you'd be like, we're coming.
Yeah, time to back up.
We'll be right there.
Yeah, cloud.
What?
She didn't ever realize there was a pillar of fire that was following.
It says that like 9 times
Yeah, when does it say it the first time?
back in Exodus.
That's what he was saying.
Yeah.
Like whenever they
Like
were
mid-Exodus.
the waters parted, right? When the waters parted, they followed the fire.
Okay, I wasn't even counting that one, but yes, that would be the first
That's what
time,
he
because
was saying.
that separated them from the Egyptians. That fire came down. I was just talking about the times when it was over the tabernacle.
Yeah.
But
That's crazy. I don't know. It never clicked for some reason. I
That's-
guess I just read right over it.
listen,
That's really cool.
don't feel too bad. Feel a little bad, but not too bad.
That's why they were so scared when they was at the mountain.
Yeah.
The whole mountain was on fire. That's why that mountain the mountain that we found, the burnt mountain, it was literally on fire. The whole top of the mountain is on fire. And I can't, the photos I've showed you don't do it justice. It's a giant freaking mountain. You've lived in Texas your whole life, you have no idea what mountains look like. He's at least been from California. He has an idea of what mountains look like, but it's like standing at the base of the Rockies and looking up, and the whole top of the Rockies are on fire. You'd be like, I prostrate myself before you, Lord.
Forest fire.
Yeah, but what's crazy is like all that's happening, and forest fire is a great example. The whole area gets dark because of
Yeah,
all the
except
smoke
for the
and
fire.
all that stuff.
It's glowing.
But then with all that happening, they're making idols at the base of it, and they're naked dancing around.
Yeah, that's what kind of blows me away.
God stops Moses in the middle, and he's like, "You got to go back down. They're being crazy."
I guess that just goes to show you some people are out there.
He was yelling at him 40 days ago.
Yeah, you think they did that, huh?
Listen, if anything, what you should take away from the Old Testament is no matter how much of a screw up you feel like you are right at home in Christianity.
Yeah.
God has put up with our crap for
I ain't
like
got nothing on
6,000
that, I'll
years.
tell ya. I ain't dancing around no golden cows.
All right, so chapter 10, we've got Yahweh instructs Moses to have 2 silver trumpets made, and he gives him some signals that the priests are going to blow them. If they blow it twice, both of them are blown twice, then everybody gathers at the tabernacle. If one is blown, all the leaders gather at the tabernacle. I don't know why I said twice in that first one. I definitely didn't write twice. I just made that up as I said it. When it's time to move, one alarm blow means the east side camp sets out. which is the first camp. Remember the
Yeah.
cross? That's the one at the bottom. They set out in order. And then when they're done, the priest would blow it again, and then the south side camps would set out, and that was camps 4, 5, and 6. And then the Levites would pick up, and they would move the tabernacle, and then the rest of the 6 would follow. Okay. Um, they also blew it in time of war. Like if they go into battle, they blew it beforehand
Battle cry.
to, well, not to hype up their troops, to remind God that they were about to fight, is what the scripture says. It was like I think it literally says to remind God, to like have him think of them because they're going into a fight. So, which is a lot of this is the foundation for why we talk about worship and the importance of worship, because it's like if you're going through stuff in your life, worship, you're making that noise, you're making those kind of things, you're reaching out to God so he'll fight for you. You're alerting him to like, hey, I'm in the thick of it, I need some help. Not that he doesn't see and that he doesn't know everything, but again, like, he doesn't just do things, he doesn't force himself on us. He's always there if you invite him in. He wants to be with you and wants to do all these things for you and has done most of the things that you'll ever need already. It's just you taking advantage of them. But part of that is, like letting him know, inviting him into the situation. There's also feasts, first days of the month. There's a feast of trumpets that they blow it. And then I think they blow it over peace and burnt offerings as well. That's what I've got marked down here. This is all in chapter 10. So this is what I was talking about. Verse 11, second year, second month, 20th day, they set out towards the wilderness of Paran. This is 50 days after they first set it up. Okay, so we talked about that in the end of Exodus, the very end of Exodus, like chapter 32, when they first got it fully set up. That would have been the first year, first month. I don't remember exactly what day. I think 50 days before this. Oh, maybe the first day, first year, first month, first day.
Do you have it marked where Paran is on the map?
Mhm.
Okay, cool.
Yep, I'll show you in a second. So verse 13, they moved for the first time according to Yahweh's command, and this is exactly how we just talked about. Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Reuben, Simeon, Gad, and then the tabernacle moves, and the other 6 follow. At this point, we haven't heard about him. We knew that Jethro was there, but Moses' brother-in-law has basically says that he's going to go back to Midian, and Moses kind of urges him to stay because he's been helping. He knows the wilderness. They're moving out for the first time, and they're just across the mountain from Midian. And now his brother-in-law's like, okay, I'm going home. Good luck. I've been here with y'all for however long. And Moses is like, but you can show us this way, and God will bless you. So Moses begins and ends the movement. We've got in verse 35, there's a couple verses in there where he's got this, he's like, God, go out and so that all the enemies flee from us. All those that hate you flee. And then when they come to rest, Moses ends it with a call to God as well. And he's like, God, return to the myriads of Israel. So
So we start our service off with the music, and that's Judah. That's what you named it. They started their journey with Judah. I wonder, would they have music before them leading the way?
well, I just told you that the trumpet started the procession.
I mean, continuously as they traveled.
Not that it says.
Doesn't say.
Okay.
it doesn't. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but
Yeah.
the trumpets were used specifically for those signals.
'Cause I know some people, when they move around, that they hadn't used it before the.
It's an interesting thought, though.
Especially if they go into battle.
So let's see if we can switch this over to numbers locations. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so see where we're at. Down here, remember, like around here is Elephant Rock. Where we at? Split Rock of Lord. There it is. There's Almond, Mount Almond. Burnt Mountain is somewhere in here. I can't. It's like right here. I don't know why you gotta go in so far to find it before it finally pops up, but it's somewhere in here. We got Burnt Mountain. So this is Mount Sinai. You can kind of see from the scratch marks that it's right in here somewhere. They're at the base of this. Okay, they set out for Paran. Okay, so let me zoom out. Make sure that we.
That's all desert.
Oh yeah, it's there are trees that you can count. you know. Anyways, so they're in this area, which is at Mount Sinai, and they're going to start moving towards Israel. Okay, which is not Israel at that time. This time it's Canaan, but it's about the same borders. Okay, so down this is going to be Canaan, and it's going to come to the base. Let me see if I can turn these layers off. Map details. Have all those. I'll turn off globe view. What have I done? Still can't turn off labels. On my tablet, I have a little more control over this. I can turn off all the labels so that we didn't have all the lines and junk. But anyway, so they're leaving from down here, and they're going to be moving up towards Canaan. Okay, this is the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is fed by the Jordan River, and the Jordan River splits Canaan on the west side and Jordan on the east side. Okay, it wasn't Jordan at that time. It was. We'll talk about it. It was like Edom. Edom is down here, and then we've got the Moabites, which are in this area, and then up above the Moabites we have the Amorites, and that's in this area. And we've run into all three of those in Numbers. Okay, and we'll get to them hopefully. It's already 9:15, so not confidently, but hopefully we'll get to them. Anyway, so they're leaving from this and they're moving to here. This is Edom. Okay, just to the west is Paran. This is this wilderness area right in here. This is Paran, and if you go on your map and you zoom in, you can find Paran, still called that. Okay, and this area is really cool, and we'll talk about it a little bit. That's actually Peter's name. That's what Peter started getting called, was Petra. His name, it means rock.
Petra.
Super feminine.
Hello, Petra.
Simon the Rock Johnson. Okay, so they're moving towards Paran. They set out towards Paran. Very feminine rock though. It sounds feminine in English transliteration. Okay, so verse 11 starts out twice. You know, you were asking about the people on the outskirts. Okay, chapter 11, verse 1. The Israelites began to complain like those who were traveling with them. Okay, it's talking about the people that were on the outskirts. This is the Egyptians and whoever else that were traveling with them. This angers Yahweh, and he starts consuming the outskirts of the camp with fire. So all those people that were running their mouths, and now the Israelites are starting to run their mouths because of it, God just starts burning them up.
He loves playing with fire.
He's fiery for sure. Anyways, same thing that happens over and over again. They do something stupid. They start getting punished for it. They go to Moses, and Moses intercedes for them, and God, he like calms down, and it says the fire goes out. They name that place Taberah, which this is not in your Bible, and I'm trying to teach you this so that you understand. But we talked about the etiological naming. That's events that named these places. If you look, Taberah was the name of the place, but Taberah means burning, okay, in Hebrew. So it was named burning because of all the people God burnt in this place because they were running their mouths. It's not like they got to a place that just happened to be named burning. They named it. They were like, we're not going to forget this place, like we're going to call this place burning. And it gets better. So verse 4, or worse, whatever you want to say. Verse 4, the rabble, again, these are the outskirts people, incite the Israelites to complaining. They're like, well, when we were in Egypt, we had fish and melons and pomegranates and onions and garlic, and now we're hungry and all this stuff. It drives Moses so crazy that he goes to God and he's like, did I birth these Israelites that now I have to bear them? If I've done well in your sight, will you just kill me? He's like, I would rather die than deal with all these complaining people. And do you ever wonder what Pastor Horn prays about us? God, just take me. I'm not going to go there. Dad, if you're watching, we love you. Let's see, I'm trying to see if he is watching. Well, nobody's watching. Everybody just went home.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that because there's been times when I grumbled like, man, I don't have enough food, or I don't have the food I wanted to eat or used to eat. But I got everything I need.
Yeah.
It's probably even healthier.
A brief glance in the mirror generally puts all of mine, like I'm not eating well enough, to bed.
Amen.
Well, I probably shouldn't complain about eating.
That's right.
Anyway, so because Moses is telling God, like, just kill me, I'm tired of dealing with this, God says, I'm going to take the spirit off of you, some of it, and I'm going to spread it between 70 elders. So go get 70 elders, bring them here, and I'm going to spread it up amongst them. Okay. He also responds to them that were had been swayed by the rabble, and now they're complaining. And he's like, I'm going to give you the meat you're asking for. I'm going to fly so much meat in here that's going to be coming out of your noses. You're going to hate it. It's going to make you sick. Okay. And he flies in an absurd amount of quail that we'll see just a little bit further. Moses gets a little mouthy with God, actually. He's like, we have all these people. We're supposed to kill all the cattle to feed them that meat. And, God's like,
is my power limited? Hello? Who are you talking to? Watch your mouth. You know. So then, like, we kind of get bounced back and forth between these two stories. Then God distributes the Spirit that He said. Um, all 70 of them immediately start prophesying. Only 68 of them came to the tabernacle. 2 of them are in the camp. Joshua comes running out of the camp to Moses to say, "They're prophesying in the camp. What should we do?" And Moses is like, are you jealous for my sake? Good. I wish all of them would prophesy. You know, it's like Moses is like, I'm sick of this. You know, good for them. um, anyways, that 70 that is appointed um, is the reason that there's still 70 elders in Israel, or there were at the time of Jesus. I don't know what there are now, but like when Paul was around, he would have been one of the 71 top people in Israel. You know, because it was the 70 elders and then the high priest. So
Who was it whose name was Israel? Jacob?
Jacob.
Jacob, okay.
So Yahweh blows in quail on a day's journey on both sides of the camp. Okay, 3 foot deep.
3 foot deep. Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't have one on the bottom.
Well, here's what's crazy. So, before we read verse 32, you need to know that the daily portion of manna was 1 omer. Okay, Omer. That was the daily portion per person. So if you had 4 people, you had 4 omers.
How big is that?
I think they estimated it's like a liter and a half. You know, so imagine that's all your food for the day is a liter and a half of this like cake, heaven cake. Um, all the quail comes in. They don't go gather 1 omer. Okay, they don't gather 10 omers. 1 omer is the daily portion. 10 omers is an ephah. 10 ephahs is a homer. Okay,
An ephah is what again? Sorry.
10 days worth of food. Okay, 1 homer is 100 days worth of food. When all the quail lands, they run and gather 100 days worth of food in quail. And it so infuriates God that he starts killing people. He, there's a plague, and people are dropping left and right. Okay?
Wow.
And again, etiologically, they name this place Kibroth Hatava, is what your Bible says. But if you look into what that means, Kibroth is graves, and Hatava is of the cravings. So because of their lust, all that died that day. You know, they went and they just had to get more and more. They got 100 days worth of food. They gathered 100 days worth of food. And it pissed God off because he's like, I'm providing for you every day. You know, you've been in this wilderness for 2 years now, and I have provided every day for you. And y'all are going to go out when already you're complaining, and I provide it out of nowhere. I blow in from the sea, you know, mountains of these birds, and you're going to go collect 100 days as if I'm not going to continue to provide for you. So they die with the plague.
Imagine how mad God gets whenever, like, we try to map out our own lives, you know? He's like, you're not going to trust me? What have I done for you so far?
I was just thinking that. How many times have I gorged myself or made a big stock of food, to last for, well, not quite 100 days, but to last a few days.
I don't know. Gets around Thanksgiving, Christmas. There's some days where I be eating some food.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've got 100 days worth, but we're definitely putting it away.
Gaining at least 5-10 pounds.
Yeah, easy.
My body's like, are we never eating again? What's going on?
Yeah.
Maybe not never, but we've got at least a month of stored up.
Yeah.
I know that I carry, because I fasted 17 days one time. And I lost a bunch. Let me see. So I normally sit at around 250 pounds. I fasted for 17 days and I dropped down to 215. So I probably have 25 days of just reserves that I carry around, so like
Yeah.
probably pretty close to a month, that I'd finally just be like down to the weight I'm supposed to be. It is sandwiches too, by the way. Okay, so we get to chapter 12. And here's what I was talking about earlier. We learned about leprosy in, I guess I can flip this back over so you can see it. We learned about leprosy in Leviticus. Here's the first time that we actually see it as like a spiritual affliction. It's not just something that happens out of nowhere or happens because of some bacteria. It's actually spiritual. Um, Moses' brother and sister start grumbling against him because his wife, Zipporah, was Midianite. She's not a Jew. He got married. Remember when he left Egypt and he went to Midian and he like saves this girl from the well from the other shepherds, right? And he marries that girl,
Who does again?
Moses.
I thought he ended up marrying her sister.
I think the daughters. It
Or
says
daughter.
the daughters are there, and he marries one of the daughters. One of the
Yeah.
daughters' name is Zipporah.
Cheated out of the one.
Oh no, you're talking about Jacob.
Jacob. Okay.
Yeah, that's Leah and Rachel. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's back in Genesis.
Okay.
Yes, he got cheated for 7 days. He had to.
Moses just married outside his lineage.
Yeah, he married a Midianite. Well, now his brother and sister are grumbling against him. If you remember, we saw in I think the beginning of Exodus that Zipporah is trouble. Remember Moses is getting sent to Egypt, and then like the next verse, God is trying to kill him, and then the next verse is Zipporah angrily circumcising their son and throwing the foreskin at Moses' feet and saying like, "There, now I'm your bride of blood." So it insinuates that she was not happy about cutting the foreskin of her baby off, um, and she only did it because God's like trying to kill Moses. um, and then after they get back to Midian, he's finally reunited with her. So I mean, like clearly she's trouble.
Yeah.
It's not just because she's not a Jew; it's because she's trouble. Well, his brother and sister are now grumbling. Moses doesn't even say anything. The scripture says in verse 2 that Yahweh hears them say this. Um, and it's funny because Moses is writing this and he puts, like Moses was the most humble man, which I think is funny. He was probably spirit led to put it in there, but it's just fun. I can imagine he's writing like, and I was the most humble man in all of the world. uh, But anyways, it says that here in like verse 3 because God heard them say that about him and God rebukes them. His presence immediately falls around them. Just imagine, you're like, gosh, this, Pastor Horn is just driving me crazy. And then all of a sudden you're surrounded in God's glory in that cloud. It wasn't fire because it was during the day, but you're surrounded in cloud and now you hear God talking. And he's like, all these other prophets, the 70 that we made, I talked to them in dreams. I talked to Moses mouth to mouth, is what it says. And when the cloud departs, Aaron looks over at Miriam and she is covered in leprosy. Okay. And so he goes to Moses. Of course, Moses is fantastic. He intercedes for her. And then God makes mention of something that we saw in Leviticus, where it's like if a father rebukes the daughter, I think they would spit in their face or something. They would be unclean for 7 days, I think. And God says, if it had been her father that rebuked her, she would have been unclean for 7 days. So at the very least, she's going to stay unclean that long. And so Miriam has to sit outside the camp. I've made this statement a couple times to y'all, but that doesn't seem so scary to us. But imagine being in some wilderness somewhere with no lights, and it's just dark at night, and there are animals. They got jackals, hyenas. I mean, all that stuff over there. They're out of the hill country, so at least it's not bears. But they probably had lions, because we see lions every so often.
Lions and tigers and bears. Oh my.
Not a great time to be outside the camp where you were protected and you had a giant pillar of fire. So she's stuck outside the camp for 7 days. After she gets brought back in, they leave and they go to Hazeroth and they camp in the desert of Paran. Now I showed you where Paran was already. So let's go back. So we find out after they get back where they were camped. But and I'm just on Google Maps. Y'all can look at any of these yourself. But right here, I don't know how to even say that. El Gaderat Spring. Yeah, that sounds good, right? So let's go and look at. Just get zoomed in here. This is Kadesh Barnea. Okay. You guys are way in. This is a spring. This is an oasis in the middle of this desert because there's a spring here. Right now, it's a small town of 700. But at some point in the past, and of course, these are all estimations based on the very scriptures that you're reading. They take and they look at the whole Old Testament and they're like, okay, we know based on what's described, this is where Edom was. They take all these different histories and they will triangulate where each thing is. Okay, well, this is Paran. This is on the base of the Canaanite land and all this. So they calculate that this is an oasis that happens to meet all these other criteria. So this is where they believe Kadesh Barnea is. Okay. From Kadesh Barnea, Yahweh tells Moses to send one spy from each of the 12 military tribes. Okay. And they go through, it says they enter through the Negev. So at some point, hopefully, you will start to remember what these are. But this is the Sinai Peninsula. Okay. This on the southwestern portion of Israel is the Negev. Okay. As you come in eastern, you've got Paran right here. Okay. We're going to see right here Petra. All this is the southern border of Edom. This is Esau's descendants. Okay. And then from right above Edom, you have the Moabites. This is on the east side of the Dead Sea. You got the Moabites. And then up above the Moabites, you've got the Amorites. Okay. What's going to happen is right now, Moses is sending the spies. Okay. The spies are going to go from Kadesh Barnea. And I can't remember what they call this way, but they're going to travel up this way along the interior, because like this is all desert right here. This is all pretty flat desert. This is all mountains. This is all mountains. You can see that from the
Will
from the
you have
south.
a slide of what you just described?
A slide.
Of you know how the tribes were split up in that area?
No, but I could probably make one. That probably wouldn't be a bad idea. What I do is I tell you like where they were at in relation to them.
Yeah.
But that's not a bad idea. I can make a map, no big deal. Anyways, so they're gonna move. The spies are gonna move up in here, okay, and they are gonna travel. We're very far north. They're gone 40 days, okay? So they start here and they travel 20 days up, all the way up here. So it says they travel from Kadesh Barnea. We find that because that's where they come back to after 40 days. They travel through the Negev, which is this area, through Hebron. We know Hebron already, which I think that's probably in here. To Rehob, which Rehob just means plain, but it's Rehob at Lebo Hamath. Lebo Hamath, Lebo means entrance, and Hamath was a town, okay? So up here, here's Hamath, okay? So they traveled all the way up to the plain at the entrance to Hamath.
And how many days did you say that was, or did you?
20. So their whole trip is 40 days. So I'm just splitting it in half, and I'm assuming it took them 20 days to get up here. This is like 200 miles. That's a pretty
Yeah,
good.
that's what I was.
That's a trek. It's only 12 guys, and these are 12 like military age guys, and they're actually being spies. So
They're all on
you know,
foot.
I don't know that they may have had camels or donkeys or something like that. It definitely seems like because a little bit later. When they get back, so 10 of them give a bad report, right? They all 12 of them say the same thing. All 12 of them say the whole land is great. It's just like God said. Um, but we did see Nephilim, which is the angels that have mated with humans, and so they're giants. We'll see in Samuel and Kings. Um, the Nephilim, like Goliath, that are getting killed. 9 foot tall, several 100-pound men. Okay, they see these guys, and they come back, and Joshua and Caleb don't disagree that like it looks bad, but they're like, God said we were going to get the land, so let's go. I mean, what are we waiting for? God's going to fight the battle. We're just walking into it, right? Well, the other 10 convince the people against it. Okay, because they convince the people against it. Those 10 die in a plague immediately. Okay, the people, even though they die in the plague, the 10 die in a plague, and God rebukes them all. The people say, "Well, even though we've sinned against God, what we're going to do is let's go up anyways." They try to come up in here and just make it to the ridge, and the Amalekites drive them back down. They are immediately pushed back. Because God's not with them, right? They're in the wrong, so they're immediately pushed back. One thing I didn't mention is there's a town called Eshel that they stop in. Eshel means cluster. I'm trying to find my cursor. Eshel means cluster. And so here's Hebron. And it says when they're coming back, they stop and they gather grapes from this place that they end up calling Cluster. And I just want to show you some of the photos of that place, and I'll let you guess if you can see why it's called Cluster. You see it there?
So they
Right there.
actually didn't repent. They just took off up that way.
I think it says they repented, but then they were immediately, they were immediately messed up. But even today, these are still vineyards. It's like a very fertile, hasn't gotten too high up into the hill country yet. Like Jerusalem, all that's very up in the mountains, right? This is in valleys that's getting good water runoff from the tall mountains, and this is where they stop and they get a grape cluster big enough that two guys have to carry it back. And of course, like I said, we know Hebron.
So I'm trying to figure out exactly where you are on the map. Where is Israel? Is it
This
south?
is Israel.
That is Israel.
This
Okay.
is Israel.
So where's the bunny ears?
The bunny ears is the Sinai Peninsula is what makes up the negative space between the bunny ears.
Okay, I thought. Okay.
This is Sinai Peninsula. This is Saudi Arabia. This is Egypt.
Okay, that's where I thought we were. I just wanted to make sure I was.
Nope,
in the
That's
right
good.
place.
That's what we're trying to get. So you know when you see these things where we're talking about. So Joshua and Caleb were the two. That's the tribe of Ephraim is Joshua, and then Caleb is the tribe of Judah. Those are the two that said we're able to take the land. Anyways, I mean, like they're definitely bigger than us, but we've got it. God's promised it to us. The congregation sides with the bad report. They grumble against Moses and Aaron, alleging that Yahweh brought them out here to have them fall by the sword. Again, they've said this like 10 times at this point, but they say we should just return to Egypt. Okay, Moses, Aaron, Joshua, and Caleb all plead with them to go into the land. They're like, we have been promised the land. We just got to go into it, and God's going to give it to us. And they decide they're going to stone them. They say, we're gonna kill them. And again, just same thing that happened with Moses' brother and sister. Yahweh shows up, and he's like, "All right, you're doing it again. Shame on you." Yahweh asks Moses. He says, "How long will they not believe in me?"
Go ahead.
And he is in verse 12 of chapter 14, Yahweh says he's going to smite them and make a new, greater, mightier nation out of
I was
Moses.
just gonna ask that.
Yeah, that's verse 12. And Moses, again, like always, is the intercessor. He is pleading with Yahweh on their behalf. He's claiming, he's like, listen, the nations will blaspheme you if you do this. They'll say that you brought Israel out here and couldn't get them into the land, so you just chose to slaughter them. And again, like they have such a good relationship that Moses talks him down. He relents. But he says, because they have seen my wonders and tested me these 10 times, they will not see the land that I promised them. So everybody over 20, God says, you're going to die in this wilderness. You're not going to go into that. Okay?
It's their children that make it.
It's their children that make it. And this list is not agreed upon. Okay, there's like there's two or three different camps where they come up with this list of what the 10 times that God's saying that they messed up is, right? Some people say, well, we probably don't have all of them because they don't like to count this one, Miriam and Aaron challenging Moses. They don't like to count that one. They also don't like to count the multiple in 4. They don't like to treat 4. Some people treat 4 as like two different instances where, like one time they were collecting too much per day. Right? They went out and they collected a lot, even though they only brought an omer home. And then one day they're trying to go out on the Sabbath or whatnot, or the one day they're trying to save from what they had. Remember, and it turned to maggots. Some people count all that as one issue. Some people try to spread that out into others.
so that they don't count some of these, like the unbelief at the Red Sea, where the fire first came down, where they're like, "Well, God bring there weren't enough graves in Egypt. God brought us out here to kill us." Anyways, but I gave you 10 instances. There are at least 10 instances where the Israelites um, and their unbelief, they have not been good to God since Exodus 1 to now we're in uh, Numbers 14. Okay. And God says, because of these 10, that they're not going to see the land. He says, everybody 20 years and older will die in the wilderness before the congregation enters the land. And then, like I said, the 10 spies who produced the bad report were immediately killed by a plague. Um, like, I don't, we probably would do the exact same thing, but it's just wild to me to think, like God is doing all these like crazy things, and still the people are like, we're gonna die.
Well, I think we do it in a sense.
Oh no, I agree.
We grumble and complain all the time to God. At least, I'm guilty of it off and on.
Yeah. But I don't know. It just seems to me, and maybe this is a stupid statement, but it seems to me like we live in an area that we live in a time that requires more faith.
Yes.
Because of everything that has already happened, we're expected to believe. Which maybe because we have everything to read, we can see what all that has happened.
I think part of that might be because of grace. The grace covers such a multitude that sometimes we take it for granted. We take things for granted. And what am I trying to say here?
I don't know, but you were saying it very emotionally, so
Yeah.
it's probably a good point.
Well, how you argue with God and grumble and.
It's getting late. I'm stretching your brain. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What time is it? Oh God. We'll quit here pretty soon. Looks like we're not going to get to Deuteronomy today. So even given everything that's happened and God telling them like you're not going to enter, they're like they wake up the next morning and they're like maybe we can do it. So they go up. The Amalekites and the Canaanites chase them back out, and that is to Hormah. And I showed you Hormah.
Yeah. Oh, no. Here I can all those examples and stuff. I can kind of apply them to my life and see how my life in a way reflects them off and on.
That is exactly what you're supposed to do. That is why I'm teaching y'all the Old Testament, because Paul told us that all of this was for our learning.
Yeah.
And why? Most of us are never going to see Israel.
But that's why I mentioned grace.
That's a bad example. We're all going to see
I take
Israel.
advantage of God's grace.
Most of us are not going to see Egypt, Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
We'll definitely see Israel because New Jerusalem and
I
all
wonder,
that.
you think we'll ever see the burning bush or anything like that?
No, but we're going to see a giant tree of life that feeds all the nations and heals them, and we're going to see, God and everything. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we'll see plenty. And whether or not they're burning trees, I can't confirm or deny, but we're going to.
We'll see.
I don't think that your Bible tells you all the neat things that are going to happen for eternity.
Oh yeah.
I think it gives us like a really surface level glimpse, because just imagine New Jerusalem is 1,500 miles of a cube. That's 1,500 miles that way, and that way. That is a giant city.
Imagine how many rooms that has.
Imagine getting dropped in Dallas and just walking. Like, how long would it take you to explore all of Dallas?
Yeah.
Dallas is like 25 miles by 25 miles.
multiply that out to 1,500 miles, and Dallas is only 150 foot tall. This is 1,500 miles tall. Like,
Yeah. It's big, but compared to our world, it's not that big. So, not that many people are gonna make it to heaven. You know what I mean?
I
Scary.
hope
It's
they
scary.
will make it.
I did the math one time, and like if you put the entire population in a city, the entire population of ever in a city that big, it still wouldn't be as populated as like Dallas.
Really?
Yeah, that's a massive city.
If you put the entire population in
Ever, he said.
ever.
So like everybody could live with that population.
They're like 100 billion people, and the population still wouldn't be as dense as like Little Elm. Yeah.
I wonder like how many people are gonna make it to heaven. It says, right, in the Bible? Like
No.
the number?
No. It does not. Well, you better hope it doesn't, because the only number it says in Revelation is 144,000.
And that means that's how many Jews, right?
That's what I think. I don't know. I think everybody has a different opinion about it, but I don't think that's specifically all the Jews that got saved. I think that is the Jews that will get saved during that last little section of the tribulation. It's 12,000 per tribe.
That's interesting.
Because if a Jew accepts Jesus, he's no longer a Jew. He's a Christian. Okay? Like his Jewishness is not more important than his salvation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a promise to Jews that is going to be, that's going to come to life. But the promise to bless the whole world happened through Jesus. And Paul was a Jew, and he makes the point that as Jews, we should be looking to be saved like the Gentiles. So, yeah, so we get into 15, and we've got, he gives a couple little commands. Let's do this last story, and then I'll let you go. I'm going to skip 15, and we're going to be at 16. So 250 of the leaders assemble with Korah from the tribe of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram from the tribe of Reuben. Okay, alleging that Moses and Aaron have exalted themselves over the entire congregation, even though they say, well, the whole congregation is holy, but y'all have exalted yourselves as if you're the only ones holy. And Moses, doesn't really say anything to them. He does get mad at this whole thing, and he tells God, he's like, please deny their offering. I have not taken a donkey from them. I've not wronged them in any way. This is just, this is just them talking. But he tells them all, you bring censers. You remember in, where was it at? Leviticus chapter 10, somewhere between 10 and 15. Remember Aaron's two sons, two of his four sons die because they offer incense incorrectly, right? And fire comes out and consumes them. You remember that? Okay. Well, Moses is setting these guys up. He tells them, okay, y'all show up with your censers, and we're gonna offer incense, and we'll see who God picks. If you think you're holy, it's like God has explicitly said not to do this. Okay, unless you are the priest, unless you're the high priest. Okay, well, he's telling them, do it. Come on, if you're holy, then we'll see. We're gonna find out real quick. They do it. They show up with these censers. Anybody want to guess what happens?
The same exact thing that happened to Aaron's two sons. They get burned up with fire. Um, anyway, so Moses rebukes Korah because remember Korah's he's Levite, but he wants to be the priesthood. He wants to be the uh, he doesn't like his position, and so he's trying to get higher up on the food chain. um, the Reubenites, Dathan and Abiram, they don't even come to the tabernacle. They're like, okay, I know the game. I saw what happened to those other two. I'm not doing that. But 250 leaders do show up. Um, Moses is furious when they don't show up, and that's what I'm saying. He asks God to disregard their offering. He also, oh no, this is the day before, because he reminds Korah to show up the next day. Korah gathers the entire congregation there. He's like, come, y'all come watch. We're gonna show you that we're holy. And they show up with their brass censers with fire and incense and start burning it. Well, the glory of God comes down, and he tells Moses, get away from all of them. Get away. I'm going to kill them all. And again, Moses goes and he intercedes. He's like, okay, God, listen, calm down. Every time I read this, I think, y'all ever watch the Avengers movies? The Marvel's Avenger movies. Anyways, the Hulk, you got this big green monster, right? They've always got Black Widow, Scarlett Johansson. She's got to talk him down, after he goes through the whole fight, she's got to calm him down because he's killing everything. She's like, the sun's getting real low. That's what I imagine. Moses is like, whoa, 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 God. It's all right. Those guys are being stupid for real. Don't kill everybody. Just kill them. He's got to bring it down. Which he does in verse 22. I'm not making it up. Go read it. 16:22. Yahweh relents. He tells Moses to get the congregation away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Okay, remember, I showed you that cross. Korah was a part of the group that sat, they were the Levites, but they sit on the southern side of the tabernacle. Right next to them is the Reubenites. Okay, well, the Reubenites is where Dathan and Abiram's camps are, and then Korah's right here. A hole opens up. Moses says, listen, I'm wrong if they die any way that man has ever died before. I am wrong. But I'm telling you, God is going to open the ground and they will fall straight into Sheol, which is the realm of the dead. And that is exactly what happens. The ground opens up and they all fall straight in, and it closes back. And then the 250 idiots that showed up with sense. Let me see. Yeah, we don't even make it out of this chapter, and Israel murmurs again. They end up 15,000 of them die.
They just don't learn, do they?
Yeah. All right. It is 9:59. I won't hold you. It looks like we're gonna drag the Torah out through the month of January, though. Before we come back next time, I will make that map. You were asking about.
Okay. One other question. When those guys, ground opened up and, the tents, obviously were in a certain order each time. Even like the east wing or the west wing,
Mhm.
the furthest ones out. Do we know which ones that, were swallowed up there?
So it doesn't tell us inside of the group. So look, you got this right. It doesn't tell us inside of the group how the tribes were lined up, but we know that this entire group was Reuben. Okay,
Right.
and then right here is I can't remember what they were called. Kohathites, I think. The Kohathites, and that is Korah's specific sect or tribe of
Right.
Levi, right? So Korah and his group's right here, and then the Reubenites that were causing trouble, they're right here. And this area opens up and they fall straight into Sheol, and then it closes back.
Wow.
And then all the 250 guys are going to be at the front of the tabernacle
Okay.
with
Right.
with brazen censers, brass censers, offering incense, and the fire is going to come out and consume all of them. Okay.
And the whole congregation, or everybody's standing around watching.
Yeah, well, it says that Korah got the whole congregation, so all of the people are standing here watching Korah. Clearly it's a lot of people, so they might have been around here
Yeah.
because Moses tells them, God tells Moses to tell them, get them away from these tents,
Right.
and so he tells them to move, and then all this opens up and they fall into Sheol,
Man.
and then it closes back.
And then they start grumbling again.
The next day, the very next day. They're like, you've done this to us. I can only imagine, Moses like, why couldn't you have killed me? All right.
I guess I shouldn't say that.
Thank you everybody for watching. Nobody's on right now, but